Heavenly Stories.
In the bustling streets of Jerusalem, the air was thick with the smell of bread, spices, and the restless murmurs of the crowd. Among the people walked Stephen, a young man known for his wisdom and kindness, a man whose faith shone brighter than the morning sun. But what made him remarkable was not just his devotion, it was the fearless courage that lay within his heart. Stephen had grown up in a world of tension, where whispers of rebellion and dissent hovered like shadows over the city. The temple was alive with debates and disputes, with elders and teachers guarding their authority jealously. Yet Stephen moved among them with a quiet strength, listening with patience, speaking with clarity, and serving with humility. It wasn't long before his reputation reached the ears of the leaders of the council. They watched him closely, suspicious of this young deacon who spoke with such power and yet with such grace. The people adored him. They followed him not for fear, but because his words inspired hope, a hope that could not be silenced. One day, as the sun dipped low over the stone rooftops, Stephen began to teach in the public square. His voice, steady and passionate, rose above the chatter of the crowd. He spoke of a kingdom not bound by walls or crowns, but by justice, mercy, and the love of God. "You have heard the words of the prophets," he said, "but do you truly see their meaning? God does not dwell in temples made by human hands. He dwells in the hearts of those who seek him with honesty and courage." Murmurs of awe spread through the listeners. Some were inspired. Others were unsettled. Among them, the council's spies noted every word, every gesture, every spark of conviction in his eyes. They whispered to one another, fearing the influence this young man held over the people. Stephen's courage was not born of arrogance. It was born of faith, a faith so deep that it made him unafraid to challenge authority, to confront injustice, and to stand for truth no matter the danger. Even when threats and rumors swirled around him, Stephen remained steadfast, knowing that his life had a purpose far greater than the approval of men. As night fell, Stephen walked home, the city glowing under the stars. He did not know that soon, the very courage that inspired the people would also summon his greatest trial. The whispers of persecution were already beginning, and the young man who spoke of love and justice would soon face a test that would echo through history. The morning sun cast long shadows over Jerusalem, painting the city in shades of gold and stone. Stephen moved among the people with a serene confidence, his heart steady, even as whispers of unrest began to stir. Word of his teachings had reached the ears of the high priests and elders, and their unease grew like a storm on the horizon. They summoned witnesses, eager to find a reason to condemn him. False accusations were whispered into eager ears, and a plot began to take shape. The council feared his influence, his words that challenged tradition, and the devotion of the people who flocked to him like moths to a flame. Stephen, however, remained unaware of the scheming that surrounded him. He continued to serve, healing the sick, comforting the grieving, and teaching with clarity and power. People from every walk of life came to hear him speak, not just for knowledge, but for hope. "You cannot confine God to stone and timber," he said one afternoon, speaking to a crowded square. "The Spirit moves where it will, and no wall, no temple, can hold the power of truth and love." The prophets spoke not for themselves, but for the promise of justice that we all seek. Among the crowd, murmurs grew into whispers. Some hearts were softened, touched by his words, while others felt a dangerous challenge to their authority. The council's agents watched closely, recording every syllable, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That evening, Stephen was brought before the Sanhedrin, the council of elders and scribes. His calm presence in the grand hall seemed to radiate light, almost defying the anger around him. They hurled accusations, twisting his words and questioning his loyalty to the law. But Stephen did not flinch. His voice rang clear and steady, full of the authority that comes from unwavering faith. "Brothers," he said, meeting each gaze, "why do you resist the Spirit? Why do you harden your hearts against what is true? Remember the prophets, those who came before, and see how their words were rejected, yet God's purpose remained unshaken. A tense silence fell over the room. Some were enraged, others confused, and a few secretly admired the courage radiating from the young deacon. Stephen's words pierced through the tension, unafraid, unbroken, as if speaking not to men, but to eternity itself. As he was dismissed from the hall, Stephen knew the road ahead would not be easy. The council's anger would grow, their plots would deepen, and the young man who spoke of hope and truth would soon be tested beyond anything he had ever imagined. But even then, a quiet fire burned within him, a courage and conviction that would not be extinguished, even in the face of mortal danger. The council chamber buzzed with tension, a storm barely contained within the stone walls. Stephen stepped forward, his posture calm but his eyes blazing with quiet fire. The elders and scribes had gathered every accusation they could summon, false witnesses, twisted words, and whispers of rebellion, but none of it shook him. "Stephen," one elder hissed, "you have spoken against the temple, against the law, against our authority. How do you answer for this?" Stephen's voice was steady, unwavering. "Brothers, I have not spoken against the law, but against injustice. I speak the truth that has always been proclaimed by the prophets. God does not dwell in buildings made by hands, he dwells in hearts that seek him. You resist this spirit, just as your ancestors resisted those who came before you. Will you reject the truth again?" Gasps rippled through the chamber. Some whispered, "How bold! How dangerous!" Others watched in awe, sensing the power behind Stephen's words, a calm, unyielding courage that could not be silenced by threats or fear. The elders fumed. They hurled questions, trying to entangle him in contradictions, hoping to catch him in error. Yet Stephen answered with precision, wisdom, and a fearless honesty that pierced through their anger. Every word he spoke was like a spark, igniting the very air with righteousness. "You stiff-necked people," Stephen declared, his voice rising with intensity, "you always resist the Spirit. Your ancestors persecuted the prophets, and now you have betrayed and murdered the righteous one. Do you see the pattern, or will you continue to blind yourselves to the truth?" The chamber erupted in shouts. Some called for him to be silenced, others seethed with outrage. Stephen did not retreat. He did not falter. In his eyes burned a light that could not be dimmed by fear, a courage that seemed almost otherworldly. Even as the council's anger reached its peak, Stephen's heart overflowed with mercy. He did not curse those who opposed him. He did not plead for mercy. Instead, he prayed silently to God, asking for guidance, strength, and forgiveness for the very men who sought to condemn him. As the meeting ended, Stephen was led away, surrounded by men who thirsted for his silence. But he walked with dignity, knowing that his purpose extended beyond their anger, beyond the walls of Jerusalem. His faith was unshakable, and his spirit untouchable. Outside, the streets were crowded with onlookers who had heard of the confrontation. Whispers of Stephen's bravery spread like wildfire. He had faced the council and spoken the truth without fear, and now the world seemed a little brighter for it. But he knew the road ahead would grow darker still, and the ultimate test of courage awaited him just beyond the horizon. The city of Jerusalem felt heavier that day, as if the stones themselves held their breath. Stephen moved through the streets with a quiet purpose, fully aware that the eyes of the council were upon him. Rumors of his bold words spread like wildfire, and the leaders of the Sanhedrin were growing more impatient, more dangerous with every passing moment. He visited the sick, comforted the grieving, and continued to teach in secret corners of the city. But the air was thick with tension, it was only a matter of time before the council would strike. Stephen's faith remained steadfast, though his heart was not blind to the peril that loomed. In the marketplace, crowds gathered, eager to hear the young deacon speak. "Do not fear what men can do," he told them, his voice carrying over the hum of chatter, "for God sees all, and his Spirit moves where it wills. Truth and justice cannot be bound by walls, nor silenced by the schemes of the proud." Whispers of admiration and worry followed him wherever he went. The council's men were everywhere, seeking witnesses, stirring dissent, and plotting the trap that would ensnare him. Stephen's courage, however, was not born of ignorance, it was born of an unwavering trust in the divine plan, a trust that gave him a calm yet radiant power even in the face of mortal danger. That evening, Stephen was summoned once more before the council. This time, the chamber was crowded with men hungry for spectacle, eager to witness his supposed downfall. The elders leaned forward, their eyes glinting with anticipation. They hurled accusations with practiced precision, twisting his words, painting him as a threat to the law, to the temple, and to their authority. Stephen stood firm, his gaze unwavering, his voice steady and full of conviction. "You have hardened your hearts," he said, his tone sharp but measured, "just as your ancestors did. You persecute the prophets, yet you fail to see the Spirit that moves through all of God's children. You have betrayed the righteous one, yet still, God's purpose will not be undone." The council erupted in shouts. Some were furious, demanding immediate punishment. Others, unsettled by his unflinching calm, whispered among themselves. Stephen's words were a sword of truth, cutting through deception, leaving only the undeniable reality of his courage. As he was escorted from the hall, the city seemed to hold its breath. People lingered at street corners, feeling the weight of what had just occurred. Stephen's resolve was stronger than ever. He knew what awaited him, and he walked toward it not with fear, but with a serene bravery that seemed almost otherworldly. The sunlight poured through the high windows of the council chamber, casting long, harsh shadows on the stone floor. Stephen stood in the center, calm, unwavering, a quiet light radiating from him that seemed to defy the fury surrounding him. The elders and scribes leaned forward, their faces twisted with anger, yet unable to break the serenity that Stephen carried like a shield. "You stiff-necked people." Stephen's voice rang clear, each word precise and powerful. "You resist the Holy Spirit, just as your ancestors did. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? They killed those who foretold the coming of the righteous one, and now you have betrayed and murdered him." A hush fell over the chamber. Some members gasped in shock, others seethed with rage. Stephen did not flinch. Every word was a deliberate strike, cutting through their anger, revealing the truth they sought to hide. But then, he did something even more extraordinary. He lifted his gaze toward the heavens. "Look," he said, his voice filled with awe and reverence, "I see the heavens open, and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." The council recoiled, their fury mixing with fear and confusion. How could a mere man see what they could not? How could he speak such words with such unwavering confidence? Yet Stephen's eyes were steady, fixed on the vision above, glowing with a divine clarity that silenced even the loudest critics. Even as stones were hurled at him, Stephen did not cry out. He fell to his knees, his heart full not with anger, but with compassion. "Lord, do not hold this sin against them," he whispered, a prayer so powerful that it seemed to echo across time itself. Each blow struck him, yet his spirit remained unbroken. He had become more than a man, he was a symbol, a beacon of courage that would shine for generations. His eyes remained on the open heavens, his final moments filled with love, forgiveness, and unwavering faith. "Lord, receive my spirit," he breathed, as the last stone fell. And in that moment, Stephen became the first martyr, the first to lay down his life for the truth, for justice, and for the promise of God's kingdom. His courage would echo through the ages, inspiring countless souls to stand firm, to speak truth, and to face persecution with unshakable faith. The city of Jerusalem was never the same. The streets, once filled with murmurs of gossip and fear, now carried whispers of awe and inspiration. Stephen's death, though brutal, had ignited something that could not be silenced. His courage, his unwavering faith, had planted a seed in the hearts of all who had witnessed his stand, or heard of it afterward. The young deacon's followers gathered in secret, their grief mingled with newfound resolve. They spoke of Stephen not with sorrow alone, but with a fiery determination to continue his work, to speak truth, and to serve the Spirit that had guided him. Even the most timid hearts felt emboldened, inspired by the example of a man who had faced death without fear and with forgiveness. News of his martyrdom spread beyond Jerusalem, reaching towns and villages throughout the region. Each retelling of his vision of heaven, of his final words of mercy and faith, became a beacon of hope. People began to understand that faith was more than tradition, it was courage, conviction, and love that could not be broken by stones or threats. Those who once opposed him quietly reconsidered the path they had chosen. Some were hardened by anger, but many could not deny the light that radiated from his sacrifice. Stephen had shown that even in the darkest moments, one's spirit could shine brighter than fear, brighter than oppression, brighter than death itself. And so, a movement began, not through armies or politics, but through hearts and voices inspired by his witness. The early believers, once scattered and afraid, grew in unity and courage. They remembered his words, "Blessed are the persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." These words became a rallying cry, a promise, and a guiding light for generations to come. Stephen's story would live on through centuries, a testament to the power of unwavering faith. His life, brief as it was, became eternal through the courage he displayed, the mercy he offered, and the vision of heaven that filled him with unshakable hope. He had faced the ultimate trial and emerged victorious, not in body, but in spirit.